Good afternoon. My name is Bill McCamley. I'm the Secretary of the New Mexico Workforce Solutions Department, and we are very happy to welcome you to this virtual town hall regarding reopening and how businesses and other employers can safely do so to make sure that customers and workers feel confident coming back into a reopened economy here in the state of New Mexico. This presentation is proudly being presented as a joint effort by the New Mexico Departments of Economic Development, Workforce Solutions, the New Mexico Small Business Development Center, and we have had great contributions from both the New Mexico Tourism Department and the Office of Safety and Health Standards for the state. Can we go to the next slide, please? And I'm going to turn off my video to make sure that the sound comes through better. Thank you. So as I said, what are some of the state agencies responsible for regulating the economy as we open back up? First, we have OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, through the New Mexico Department of the Environment, is responsible for enforcing workplace safety and health regulations to make sure that both workers and customers have a safe environment so that they can participate in the economy in a way that is not only safe on a general basis, but in terms of the COVID-19 situation, takes into account the very specific threats that that virus has on our population. Next, we have the New Mexico Department of Health. They are responsible for setting up all of the guidance regarding the different health issues that we all have to take advantage of. The New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions has responsibility for both the training of workforces as we open up into a new economic time, as well as job placement when people come off unemployment. And as many of you know, we run the unemployment office for the state. And so we're responsible for overseeing the process by which workers come back into work. The Department of Economic Development is responsible for making sure that New Mexico is doing everything we possibly can in terms of creating as many jobs as possible. And they have been great partners working with the rest of us as we move forward and explore new economic opportunities in the 2020 year. And we've been working closely with the Small Business Development Center of New Mexico, who's responsible for really helping businesses in terms of advice, planning, finding loans and grants, all the things that small businesses need to succeed. And these are some of the main state agencies that are working together in the Governor Lujan Grisham administration to make sure that as we open the state back up, we do so in a healthy and safe manner. Next slide, please. So what are some of the specific COVID-safe practices that are going to be required for businesses as the economy opens back up? The first is, where possible, we are encouraging businesses, we are encouraging supervisors and owners to allow for remote work. Now, we know sometimes that's not possible when you have a customer-facing portion of your business. But for things like HR managers and accountants, is it possible to work from home? If the answer is yes, folks are strongly encouraged to keep up that practice. Where the workplace has to have folks in it, we're talking about retail stores, salons, gyms, please provide 6 feet of distance between any individual whenever possible. As you look at some of the grocery stores around the state, they've done a wonderful job of putting X's on the ground in checkout lines that are 6 feet apart. You've also seen some of them put one-way arrows through a lot of their aisles. These are some of the great strategies that businesses are employing to make sure that social distancing is enforced to keep New Mexicans safe. Can we close common areas where people congregate? So if you have an office space, do you have to have a break room? Do you have to have a foyer open for people that are going to be encouraged to congregate? As people come back into your offices, as people come back into your businesses, we know it's going to be tempting because that's what we do. We like to congregate and talk around the water cooler, talk around the break room. When it's possible, we're asking folks to close those spaces off to make sure that people aren't doing that. Continues to spread in New Mexico. Can you do remote meetings? Is it possible to not have everyone together in a big room to talk about trainings, talk about workplace issues? If you can find ways of doing that as we're doing now, on a web application, that's a better way to move forward. We want to make sure that all employees have masks and wear them except when eating, drinking, or exercising, or for medical needs. You can make a request to the New Mexico Department of Health for masks, and we're going to be talking further in this presentation about different resources that employers will have in request that are going to be necessary moving forward in the COVID situation. Can we train employees in daily cleaning strategies, and what types of great protocol can be put in to make sure that hygiene and respiratory etiquette are put into place? How do you really wipe down a table so that you make sure that as many germs are off it as possible? How do we train people to make sure that they are using social distancing? These are the sorts of great resources that you can employ as an employer to make sure that your employees they know exactly what they need to be doing in terms of cleaning. And that will give confidence both to your employees and the customers that are coming into your workspace. Lastly, how do you make hand washing and sanitizer available for everyone so that they can understand it's important to wash my hands, it's important to keep my hands clean, so that if I ever do touch my face, which is once again one of the things you shouldn't be doing, we're not transmitting the virus. Next slide, please. One of the things that the State Department of Health and the state epidemiologist is really asking for supervisors and owners to do is to screen employees every day when they come in. Make sure if you've got a thermometer, you're checking people with those touchless thermometers to make sure they don't have a fever. If they're experiencing coughing, if they're experiencing shortness of breath, if they're saying they have a sore throat, headache, muscle pain, chills, all the shaking, and loss of taste or smell, which is one of the more recent things that have come out about COVID, please make sure they are sent home. If people are expressing symptoms, they're much more likely to be able to spread the virus around to your other workers and your employees, and please make sure you send them home. You can get free testing from the New Mexico Department of Health and all the information on that testing is available at the link that is right here. Next slide, please. What are some of the recommended best practices that a lot of the state agencies have come together and unified behind, and how to get these goals down? The first is, how do you communicate a plan for all your employees in hopefully virtual forums, but also different ways of answering their questions? How do we do this in a safe manner? Because employees are going to have a lot of questions about what safe practices are moving forward, what they should be doing, how to deal with customers coming in different scenarios. Try to work out a plan to make sure that you are asking employees what they think and finding effective strategies of moving forward. In addition, how do you get specific team of employees or a leader in your workplace that can help facilitate these discussions and facilitate these different scenarios so that everybody knows what to do in different situations? If you have a vulnerable worker, and we'll be talking about the specific nature of what that is here in a little bit, try to figure out a way that they can move to another area that doesn't put them in touch with the public, in touch with other employees, so they can keep their exposure lower. If you have an older worker, for example, if you have someone who's asthmatic, a lot of times we've actually been hearing recently that employers have been great at getting their folks to wear masks. The problem is you do have some people out there with severe asthma who can't wear a mask. And the Americans with Disabilities Act would ask you to try to find an accommodation for them. So if there's ways that they can work without exposing themselves, that's the best solution for everyone. If you can, and I know this is gonna be a lot harder for workspaces where you have a lot of people, but if you can, try to consider having a log of all of your customers. Now this is gonna be easier for a place like a hotel, but if other places consider putting a log together, what will that do? If there's a positive test of one of your customers, the Department of Health is going to be asking, can we try to find a way of getting everyone that they've been in contact with? That's called contact tracing, and it allows people to find out all the folks that have been exposed and ask them to quarantine. That's the way that is a proven method of helping to beat this virus without having a vaccine yet. So if there's a way that you can get a log of all your customers and when they came in, it will help Department of Health employees with those search requirements. Also, if you can find ways of making sure that your HVAC systems are working, maintained, and working and smoothly, that's going to help get airflow through the building, which will help get a virus spread out of your workspace. Next slide, please. So the state of New Mexico has worked very, very hard to make sure that there are very specific pieces of guidance available for individual areas of the economy. And if you go to the link that is on this site, and this presentation will be made available by Facebook through the Department of Workforce Solutions and on our YouTube site. If you go to this site, you will be able to get specific guidance on all of the safety procedures for all of these very, very different parts of the economy. Obviously, a meat packing plant and a gymnasium are going to be in very different situations. And while the previous series of guidance are good for everywhere, there's going to be some specific things that are asked of in these different types of the economy. So please download this document, go through it, and look for your area of the economy. And if you do so, you're going to find these very specific pieces of direction that were worked on extremely hard by members of the public and private sector to ensure that all of these areas are as safe as possible. Next slide, please. What I want to do now is talk about the Family First Coronavirus Act. And this was the bill that was passed by Congress in the middle of March. And one of the biggest provisions of it was to provide sick leave and paid family leave for different parts of the workforce that might be affected directly or indirectly by COVID-19. The first part of the paid sick leave is if you have an employee who is unable to work because that person is quarantined because they were asked to by federal, state, or local government folks who are working on behalf of the healthcare program. If you're experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and need a diagnosis and you've been asked to quarantine, you've got to stay home. It is a requirement that they get 2 weeks of paid sick leave while they get tested and stay quarantined. Furthermore, you have another 2 weeks of paid sick leave at 2/3 of the employee's regular rate because the employee is able to work because of a bona fide need to care for an individual, an additional subject to quarantine. So if I'm at home taking care of a kid who's being quarantined, if I'm at home being a caregiver to a parent because of quarantine, I'm able to get this sick leave, and employers are asked to provide it. Next slide, please. Additionally, there is a provision in the Families First Coronavirus Act that gives up to 10 additional weeks of paid extended family medical leave at 2/3 the employee's rate, where an employee who's been employed for at least 30 calendar days is unable to work because they have to go take care of a child whose school is out because of COVID-19. That probably won't be as much of an issue in New Mexico going forward, but it could be if individual school districts are in areas which continue to be shut down. Furthermore, there are exceptions to this rule. If you are with a company or an employer that is over 500 employees, you are exempted from this act. If you have a small business with less than 50 employees, you may qualify for an exemption from the paid expanded family and medical leave portion of this act if you absolutely have to have people and letting people go would jeopardize the viability of your business. All employees of covered employers are eligible for those 2 weeks of paid sick leave for specific reasons related to COVID-19 for at least 30 days, an additional of up to 10 weeks of paid family leave for a child under the COVID-19 Act. So if you want to go find more about this situation, please go to the Department of Labor website, which is laid out at the bottom of this slide, and it will allow you to find all of the different scenarios involved with this act. And we'll go to the next slide, and it'll show you how to get actually reimbursed for the cost of this provision. the federal government has allocated that a tax credit program be put into place for you to get reimbursed. So if you have folks that are on sick leave, on part of that paid family leave to take care of a kid because school shuts down, or all of the different issues, please look through the irs.gov site that is laid out on the bottom of this site to find out how to get reimbursed for the cost of this sick leave. The Congress and the president who signed this into place understand that this is going to have costs on businesses, and they've devised the following program for people to be able to get reimbursed for that cost. Next slide, please. So one of the things that we at the Workforce Solutions Department have to look at is that when businesses start to open back up, there are a lot of people on unemployment, and you as an employer may have an employee that you want to bring back into your workplace. Well, that person is supposed to come back unless they can show what is called good cause. It's a legal term meaning that they're going to have harm going back into the workspace. One of the specific COVID areas that we have to address is there are going to be high-risk people in New Mexico where going back to work is going to put them at a much higher danger of, if it being exposed to COVID, having a potentially bad situation. So we worked with the state epidemiologists through the Department of Health, and they came up with the documented cases on the screen before you on what is a high-risk person. So anybody 65 or older, you're obviously not going to need any documentation. If I'm over 65 and I have a birth certificate, I should be staying home as much as I can and not going into a workspace. For the rest of the bullet points that you see before you, the lung disease, the heart conditions, former cancer treatment, asthma, those sorts of things, the worker is going to have to show a document from a medical provider that details out their problem and says that the medical provider says they should not come back to work. So if they have that document, they're going to be allowed to stay on unemployment. And if an employer says, hey, I'm going to challenge that, then our investigators will look to see how, if that is real, and get any other evidence that they're going to need from the worker to be able to stay on unemployment, even though a job was offered to them that was equivalent to the one that they had before they went on unemployment. Next slide, please. The other issue that we need to look at, and this is what we've been talking about, right, is how you as an employer will report these workers. So we actually have a printable PDF on our website, which you can see at that dws.state.nm.us address on your screen. And if you are an employer, you can put in all the information that we ask for on the job offer that you made to someone and that they denied it. As I said, unless they have good cause, they're supposed to come back to work. What is not good cause? Good cause is not, I am making more in unemployment than comparable work. We hear that fairly regularly, especially as people are getting an additional $600 per week on top of their regular unemployment claims. But you can't just say, hey, I'm making more on unemployment, so I'm not going to go back up to work. That is not going to be a reason that our department says is okay for continuing unemployment if they stop going back to work. You also can't say generally, I'm scared of COVID-19. We all have some apprehension about this right now. It's something that's been going on for 3 or 4 weeks, and we all have some concerns. But just a general fear of COVID-19 is not going to be considered good cause. What will be good cause? Hey, I have one of those pre-existing conditions that was documented above, or I live with someone who does, so if I get it, I'm going to expose them. I've got a letter from my doctor or a letter from my medical health provider at my health clinic saying that I've got cancer, I've got severe asthma or whatever, and they're saying that I shouldn't go back to work. That can be considered good cause. Or if there's some proof that an employer is not following those COVID-safe practices that we both talked about in detail earlier and that are in more detail documented on the economic area specific portions of the governor's document, and they can say, hey, look, There are pictures available of supervisors not wearing masks. There are other employees that will testify that the employer is requiring us to congregate in groups, et cetera, and so on. Then our investigators and our appeals team will consider that in the discussions about whether or not that is good cause for coming back. Next slide, please. Thank you. What is our message here? Our message here is that there is a joint responsibility between workers and employers in coming back to work. An employer should be putting a strategy together for service delivery, knowing that these public health orders are going to require us to go a little bit farther to keep people safe. How do you get resources to make sure that your staff is trained? Understanding the unemployment rules and responsibilities. So if someone comes to you and says, hey, I'm over the age of 65, they're not going to have to come back to work. Understanding that laws pertaining to COVID-19, the leave situation, so if someone does have to go quarantine themselves, that there are going to be provisions out for sick leave. Making sure that we're thinking outside the box and looking at trying to do staffing patterns that make sure that your workers and your customers, as well as their families, are taken care of. And those are responsibilities of the employer. But workers also have some responsibility here. They need to know the unemployment rules as well. And that just because you're making more money on unemployment doesn't mean you're not supposed to go back to work. Making sure that you as a worker have a plan for returning to work and know that you should try to wear a mask. You should abide by the sanitation rules that your employer is putting into place. And you have a responsibility there as well. If there are opportunities for training, you should participate in them to know how to de-escalate situations with customers. Make sure you know all the sanitation guidelines available at your place of work. That's a responsibility from the employer, as well as making sure that you leverage all that education and training to make sure that you have additional work opportunities available to you moving forward into the rest of the year as new areas of the economy open up. Next slide, please. And one of the questions we hear all the time is, hey, there's got to be PPE at my place of business. Where do I get help with this? So we've got a couple of different resources open for you today. The first is the New Mexico, there is an alliance put together by the folks down at New Mexico Tech, and you can get their contact information below at the bottom of the screen. They're really helping businesses work with the public sector to find disinfectant spray, masks, gloves, et cetera, and so on. And this is one of the resources that are going to be available that we're asking you to explore to make sure that your workplace is safe and healthy. And then we have one more after. NMA, all right, so that was the one from NMACI, the Association of Commerce and Industry. I apologize, I got that mixed up. This one is the Emergency Supply Collaborative. And this is the one from New Mexico Tech. And if, once again, we'll try to add that, that website that link goes to on our FAQs, so you know where to go there. They are also helping employers really find the different face masks, hand sanitizers, face shields that they're going to need to keep safe workspaces. So we've got a couple of different avenues that you can pursue as an employer to help get that PPE and get that equipment that you need moving forward to make sure that your workers and your customers are safe. And moving on to the next slide, I'm going to turn it over to New Mexico Workforce Solutions Deputy Secretary Rick Serna, who's going to go through some of the resources that we can offer for staffing. And then Russell Wyrick from the New Mexico Small Business Association is going to be talking about resources available through his shop as well. Ricky?
Great. Thank you, Secretary McCamley. It's a pleasure to be on this webinar with everyone this afternoon. Just to give you a heads up, there's only going to be a few slides left. If you have any questions or you start formulating any while we go over the next 3 slides, you can start typing those questions into the Q&A box that's available to you at the bottom of your screen. And then after we finish the last slide here, we'll open it up to an opportunity to have those questions answered by anyone that's available to answer them. Anything that we can't get to, we'll publish responses at a later time. So one of the major resources available on our website specifically for employers is called All Hands New Mexico. And we launched this webpage about a month ago to provide a forum and a platform for you all to post position vacancies that you're seeking to fill in light of some of the public health orders that have been put in place, or in light of all the public health orders that have been put in place. So on that link that's available under the first bullet, you'll be able to go onto our website and provide a brief description of the positions by location. And of course, we'll do our best to promote those available positions broadly so that we can connect you with qualified job seekers. We also, of course, through many of our field offices, will play a role in specifically promoting those positions as we meet with job seekers who are looking for work. We also are in the process of taking virtual job orders in all of the Department of Workforce Solutions through its Employment Services Department and more than 20 field offices across the state offer what's called direct recruitment services through job orders. And that is the process through which employers post their available positions within our job system, and our local one-stop connection office will work to directly connect job seekers who are qualified for those positions with you directly as employers. We can do anything from pre-applicant screening. We can suppress those postings so that we can conduct pre-employment testing and any other pre-screening that you would like for us to do before pushing qualified applicants your way can be done through those job orders. We've also been successful in conducting a couple of virtual hiring events whereby employers are able to meet with applicants who we already suggest meet the minimum qualification for your position. So the virtual hiring events is a way for us to connect you with job seekers locally who are looking for opportunities that match the minimum qualifications and skill sets and education requirements that you're listing in any of your postings. To that end, we understand that this is an opportunity for a number of job seekers to explore training and educational opportunities that help them grow into the positions that you all may have available. So we are moving through a statewide business process that standardizes our training opportunities, both for existing staff and job seekers, that do a couple of things. One is we help prepare them to meet the minimum qualifications for your positions. So we're looking at labor market information to identify where the major vacancies are by occupation titles. And then we're identifying the common skills and even industry credentials that are associated with those occupations. And we're developing trainings as partners, meaning Department of Workforce Solutions and our local workforce development boards. But we're also working very closely with post-secondary institutions, namely two-year community colleges and branch campuses, to develop short-term and boot camp type of trainings that help prepare job seekers for your jobs, that can help train your staff in COVID-19 mitigation strategies, and even in de-escalation strategies to help your staff better manage their responsibilities to ensure that consumers are coming in compliance with public health orders. Some of the partners that you need to be aware of who are all working throughout the state to make sure that you're aware of the financial resources, training opportunities, and mentor opportunities are the 4 regional workforce development boards. New Mexico's Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funding, which is about $22 million a year, flows from the Department of Workforce Solutions to 4 different regional workforce development boards in the north. That would essentially be Santa Fe North and everything to the west side of the state. The Central Board, which covers the Sandoval and Bernalillo counties. The Southwestern Board and Eastern Boards, of course, each provide WIOA training and educational dollars to their respective counties throughout the state. And we've provided a link there that will send you directly to their individual websites and contact information for each of their employees. Those boards essentially manage the millions of dollars that are available to job seekers and employers to make sure that we create training and educational opportunities that align job seekers with what employers need. More than 24 workforce connection offices are also at your disposal across the state of New Mexico. Department of Workforce Solutions manages these offices in partnership with the regional workforce development boards. We call them one-stop connection offices because essentially they serve as a hub for both job seekers and employers and anybody interested in receiving assistance on anything from it's to direct employment services. Our partner economic development department also offers community and business rural development resources through 6 different regions. And they staff a regional economic development point person in each of those regions. And you can find not only how the regions are split up across the state, but also the contact information for that local representative at the link we provided below. I'm going to skip to this last bullet to talk about how we're working with post-secondary institutions so that I can leave you with Russell from SBDC to talk a little bit about what SBDC is doing in partnership with EDD. But we're working in particular with local 2-year institutions of higher education to really connect them with our data on the current vacancies across the state of New Mexico. And our database is able to help us identify whenever you, with the skills you all are listing in those job postings. So if you post a position for a vacancy that you currently have, what we're able to do at the Department of Workforce Solutions is include that position vacancy or that position posting in a data pool that helps us isolate that vacancy by an industry, by an occupation type, by skills and minimum qualifications, whether it be educational requirements, whether it be experience requirements, or even an industry credential requirement. So what we do then is we're working with institutions of higher ed across the state to share with them what those vacancies and minimum qualifications and skill sets are in their immediate region, then identify what programs of study or what kind of short-term boot camp trainings they can conduct to prepare local job seekers for those positions. Then we hope to connect you all as employers with that local workforce development board, because those job seekers can have that training paid for by Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funding. You all as employers could then receive wage reimbursements for hiring those individuals while they're going through that training program and teaching them some of those skills while they're working for you. We call it on-the-job training contracts. So the incentives for the job seeker is the training and education is paid for, and the incentive for you all as employers is we can reimburse you for their wages while they're in these programs and learning while they're also working. So that is a program that responds to your struggles, if you have them, with making payroll while also training your staff to operate in under COVID-19 public health orders. So the last bullet, or the second to last bullet, I want to turn it over to Russell, the state director for the SBDC, and he can speak briefly about the work that his team is doing.
Thank you. This is Russell Weirich. I'm the Executive State Director for the New Mexico Small Business Development Center Network. And we're here to help you in multiple ways through this. So One of the primary ways we assist, we have the 19 service centers across the state, and we provide one-on-one counseling. So business counseling, think of that as basically a business consultant that you don't have to pay for. It's funded by the U.S. Small Business Administration and the state through the Higher Education Department. And we work with you one-on-one for your specific needs, help you navigate the challenges you have in sustaining and growing your business. We also have trainings that we provide specifically. We've got some for COVID-19 that we're offering. All these services are absolutely no charge. So to access those services, you'd go to our website, which is nmsbdc.org. Again, that's NM for New Mexico, of course. SBDC, which is for Small Business Development Centers. .org, and you go there, and then on the front of the page you'll see COVID-19 counseling or COVID-19 training. On the training, we've got multiple trainings available for you. We've got reopening and compliance with the executive health orders. We've got consumer buying habits, teaching you how buying habits have changed during COVID-19 to help you navigate that. The PPP loan forgiveness application requirements training, as well as the federal tax credit programs, tax deferrals, and then the various assistance programs for the state. So multiple opportunities for you there. I want to give you a couple of additional pieces of information that will help you very quickly. We have set up 2 special numbers for our tourism-related businesses. So we're working with the tourism department. If you've got your tour operator or your restaurant that a lot of your customers are tourists, you know, any service business or something related to that, I'm going to give you 2 phone numbers. If you're in the northern New Mexico area, we've got a number set up for you. It's 505-300-2781. Again, that's 505-300-2781. And then in southern New Mexico, we've got 575-800-0345. Again, 575-800-0345. The other thing I want to mention, as you're navigating this, there was a lot of discussion about the EIDL and the PPP, and I think people overlooked an important section of the CARES Act, and that was section 1112, which has a deferment. Well, it's not even deferment. It's the payments for the 7A and 504 loans. So if your business applies for a regular 7A loan or a 504 loan from the SBA, the SBA is going to make those payments and interest payments for you for the first 6 months. So definitely reach out to the SBDC. We can help you with your HR related questions. We can help you with any of those issues. And again, there's no charge for the services that we provide. And I'll pass it back over.
Great. Thank you so much, Russell. So as we move on to questions, we are taking questions in the chat box, which is available on the bottom. And we have some moderators who are going to be going through the questions in a cycle. So we have Michelle Velarde, the New Mexico Department of Workforce Solutions Field Operations Director. We have Stacy Johnson, the Workforce Solutions Public Information Officer. And we have Anthony Jenks, who is the office manager of our Albuquerque Mountain Road office. And they'll be reading questions to us. In addition to myself, Deputy Secretary Serna, and Russell Wyrick, we also should have Daniel Schlegel from Governor Lujan Grisham's office on the call. So Michelle, do you want to start with the first question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Secretary. The first question is, when does an employer send an employee home and require testing for cough and a sore throat, and does the employer pay for that time off?
Go ahead. Okay, so yeah, the encouragement from the Department of Health is if you do have someone who is sick, please send them home and get tested through the Department of Health. That is the question. And what we understand is that the Family First Coronavirus bill is requiring for sick leave. Now, once again, there is a reimbursement part of that Family First Coronavirus Act, which you can see on the slide that was done before, to allow you to get reimbursed for the cost of these provisions. So yes, we do ask that those folks get sent home. And if they've got many of those symptoms, we ask you to get tested. There are tests available in most, if not all, communities throughout the state. And we are asking people to get tested whenever they can. Test results are usually available fairly quickly, but yes, they should be paid. And from our understanding, and Russell, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but from our understanding, they should be paid, and you should be able to get a tax credit through the Family First Coronavirus Act. Russell, is that your information?
That is our understanding as well, yes.
Thank you. Next question from Stacy Johnson.
Okay, this one says, could you please talk about the pandemic unemployment assistance for business owners who lost revenue due to a shutdown? Should they seek for SBA disaster loans? If so, is it correct they won't be eligible for PUA if they receive loans from SBA?
So I'm going to hand this over to Russell to talk about the disaster loans, but with the pandemic unemployment assistance, that only counts if you're bringing in wages. So if you get a loan and you want to pay for workspaces, equipment, all the other things that are in line with running a small business, yes, you should still apply for the pandemic unemployment assistance program, because we're only going to ask you to report the wages that you're bringing in. Russell?
So I'll try to explain this the best way possible, because it's not really complicated, but there's some nuances here. If you get an SBA loan, like a PPP, to pay your own salary, okay, you're going to pay your salary, and and you get that forgiven, okay, well, then you're going to have problems with the PUA, because you can't go to the state and say that, because then you get being paid twice, which would be considered a fraud situation, okay? So, but let's say you're borrowing money, but you're not doing it for your own payroll. You're doing it like to the idle to just cover your basic business expenses, but you're not paying yourself out of it. You're using it to pay your rent and pay your utilities, etc. Then you're not going to run into that same issue. So it really depends. Yes, you are eligible for PPP and idle and PUA. You just got to make sure that for the idle and the PPP, you're not using the forgivable portion of that and applying for the PUA at the same time in regards to your salary or pay.
Thank you. Anthony, can we go on to the next question?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, what if an at-risk employee is refusing to return to work after exhausting the 2 weeks of emergency sick leave per physician orders, even though the employer has addressed all concerns about the working environment and is following guidelines, social distancing, masks, etc.?
Right, so that would be a situation with unemployment from the Workforce Solutions area, where if they applied for unemployment and they could not prove good cause, they could not make an argument that an evidence was there for good cause, then there's a chance that they would not be eligible for unemployment because you as an employer offered them the chance to come back to work in what would presumably be a safe environment where people were following all of the issues or all of the guidelines that the governor's office presented. Going on to the next question, we're back up to Michelle.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The next question, a restaurant worker refuses to wear a mask and states they have a doctor's note. Do they get to work that way, or can they be sent home?
Yeah, this becomes an Americans with Disabilities Act scenario. What we are asking people to try to do is find what is called a reasonable accommodation. Is there a way for a person, and we've had a couple of these come in through the past week where someone says, look, I've got serious asthma. My medical provider has written down documentation that say if I wear a mask, it's going to put me in a serious health issue because of my asthma. What we're asking employers to do is to find some kind of way of providing a reasonable accommodation. Can they do something else? Can they work in a part of your store that doesn't require them to deal with customers directly? And that's why we talked about being creative earlier in the scenario. If that's not the case, then it becomes an ADA issue, and we'll be dealing with that on a case-by-case basis through our Human Rights Bureau. But our request is for folks to really try to work with the employees to try to find that reasonable accommodation first. Moving on to the next question, Stacy Johnston, our PIO.
Can we require in the employee to provide a copy of the test results of their COVID test before allowing them to return to work?
That one I do not have an answer for. Do the other folks on this call have an answer for that?
Secretary, this is Dan Schlegel from the governor's office. I believe there might be some issues with some HIPAA violations there, but you know, I would have to get in touch with our Department of Health to confirm if that is the case. There are some situations where that have been reported, and I believe it does violate some issues there, unless it's a voluntary disclosure.
Dan, thank you very much for that. So what we need to do on that is kind of check back with the Department of Health, and we'll have an FAQ we put out after this with a lot of these questions on it that we don't have a straight up answer for right now. So we'll check in with them, we'll get a definitive answer, and we'll put it on an FAQ following up this. I'm sorry for not having an answer straight up for you right now, but we will do our best to get you an answer as soon as we can. Moving on to Anthony, next question.
Yes, sir. What is the date of the next phase of letting employees go back to work in the office?
That I'm going to turn over to Dan from Governor Lujan Grisham's office.
Thank you, Secretary, and thank you for that question. So just a little bit of a recap. On June 1st, we made a significant opening for restaurants at 50%, as well as some other major industries. And office environments are currently at 25% capacity. So that covers a large swath of industries. The governor and public health officials on June 1st, when they made the announcement a couple of days beforehand, asked for or announced that they would be looking for 3 more weeks of data in order to make the determination for the next phased reopening, which would be phase number 2. So the public health officials and the governor will be reviewing that data starting June 21st, and we'll be making determinations at that time. If things are moving, the data is moving in the right direction, the next major reopenings could be occurring late June or early July.
Thank you, Dan. Really appreciate it. Going on to Michelle for the next question.
Yes, again, this question is occurring quite a bit. Will we be providing the presentation slides? And where will the link be posted?
So I know we're going to be providing the presentation as a whole. Stacy, can we provide those slides maybe on our website under the business portion of our website?
So this entire presentation will be available later today on the department YouTube channel. And we will also put that link out to all participants. We'll send you a direct link to that video.
And we'll try to find a way to get the slides themselves done in a PDF format that you can get, so you can get that information yourself without watching the whole entire video. Moving on to Stacy for the next question.
Thank you. And actually, I'm just going to add a little bit to that last one. In the description box of our YouTube, there'll be direct links right there that you can just click on as well.
Great.
Here's the question. Will employers be required to tip wage workers at a standard hourly wage while they still report tips received? Not quite sure.
So can you read that again, please?
Sure. It says, will it require employers to put tip wage workers at a standard hourly wage while they still report tips received?
Right. So from what I understand about the minimum wage law that is in place right now is that if your worker is working the hours that they're working and they're on a tipped wage, they are required to be paid at least the minimum wage while they are working. So if you're giving folks hours and they're working those hours, if no customers are in there and they're not getting any tips, they are required to make from you, the employer, the minimum wage. I think that was the question that was being asked, but our minimum wage laws are fairly clear in this scenario. And yes, people need to be making the very minimum wage that is required by the geography that you're in. Moving on to Anthony.
Yes, sir. Can you provide any guidance on when procedures or guidelines will be available for large gathering businesses such as festivals, fairs, and amusement parks? Are there timelines for them safely reopening?
So I know the governor's office is working very, very closely with the Department of Health to monitor the spread of the virus. And I think, Danielle, I'm okay in basically saying that the virus and how we do in terms of controlling the spread is going to be dictating the terms of those issues. But maybe you have some further enlightenment we can give to folks about those discussions on those issues?
Yes, thank you, Secretary, and thank you for that question. This is one of the most challenging moving forward as we're tracking the spread of the virus. It's going to be very difficult um, to have people gathering in large numbers for the foreseeable future. We are working with through the Economic Recovery Council to come up with creative ways to allow for certain types of limited capacity events, including, such as drive-in events. We'll be coming out with some guidance on that because a lot of people have been curious to do that and be creative in their event planning. I believe that the Economic Recovery Council and the Medical Advisory Team are currently looking at this question extremely hard, and we'll be coming out with some guidance hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But I do think it's safe to say that any mass gathering over 100 people will be prohibited for the foreseeable future. I apologize, I don't have an exact date for you, but as the Secretary said, this is very much about how the data is looking and any creative ways that we can to mitigate the spread through some kind of community interactions moving forward.
Thank you, Dan. Moving on to Michelle for the next question.
Yes, are farm workers working outside and social distancing required to wear a mask?
That's a good question. That's one that I've not come up before. Russell or Dan, have you run into that one before?
Yeah, Secretary, this is Dan. So the language in the COVID safe practices are, there's exceptions for eating and drinking, obviously, and for, as the Secretary mentioned, for medical reasons. And also the language says while in the presence of others. So we defer to the business owner to really make sure that they, depending on how their space, their workplace is organized, to make a determination around that. So in this scenario of if you're a farm worker and not very close in the presence of others, if you're, obviously if you're 25 feet away, that could be considered not while in the presence of others. So I would ask the business owners to take that language and make the most reasonable determination within their workplace.
And I would also just add to that as we move forward with these guidelines and your interpretation of them, understand that this is about the safety of your workers, and that's important because their health is important to us, but it's also important so that they understand that they're going back to a safe environment. I know that we've been having discussions with farmers on how we recruit farm workers to come back to work, and understanding that the safer your environment is, the easier it's going to be for you to recruit people to come back to work. So that's an excellent question. Thank you. Moving on to Stacy for the next question.
Okay, this is a two-part question. So there are employees who are stating that having to wear a mask is against their constitutional rights. How does an employer deal with these employees who refuse to comply? Also, on the other end, there are certain employers who are not holding customers accountable for wearing masks. Can they legally stop these customers from coming into their stores?
I would take the second one first. And from an unemployment perspective, I think if customers are allowed to come into your business and walk around without masks and do so in a way that they're not socially distancing, I think that our investigators and our appeals folks who are going to be making determinations about unemployment, that is something they can probably take into account to say, hey, is my workspace safe, or do I have good cause for being able to either go on for the first time or return to unemployment? So I think that's something that we would take into account moving forward in a workspace like that for a specific unemployment claimant who wanted to make that argument. Daniel, I don't know if you want to address the first issue or whether we even have an answer on that.
Yeah, Secretary, remind me what the first part of that question was.
Can a business owner force a customer to come in and wear a mask?
Yeah, it does go to the ADA even for customers as well. So I would kind of defer to the guidance that you had around that. That's my understanding. But it is I recognize it's a tricky situation, and we specifically in the COVID safe practices, we have not required that business owners require their customers to wear them, because we don't want to put you in a retail, business owner in a retail space in the position of being an enforcement officer. So it is a challenging situation, but there are businesses around the state, and including certain industries, that are taking the tack of requiring all customers to wear them and are comfortable in that situation. So I would say that it is a case-by-case basis, depending on the comfort level of the employer, but it does have some implications for your employees as well to keep them safe. So.
And have there been any discussions on your end, if I'm an employer and an employee comes in and says, I don't want to wear a mask, it's not my medical situation, but it's my constitutional liberty not to wear a mask? Have we had discussions about what a proper response for that might be?
You know, that is a tough one as well. And Secretary, I have not heard that situation come up around the constitutional freedoms. I've only heard it come up with the medical exemption. So we would have to do some more research on that point.
Okay, so let's research that one and kind of sit down and see if we can come up with a good answer for that. We did promise people we'd be done by 3, so we've got time for maybe a couple of more questions. I believe, Anthony, you're the next one up.
Yes, Mr. Secretary. Have they come up with a plan for Balloon Fiesta in Albuquerque?
That's a Daniel question.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary. Thank you for the question. As this is one of New Mexico's premier flagship international events, there has been a lot of discussion. They have a board that's been meeting to determine, and this is not direct conversations that I have, but this is my understanding, that they are working on plans to mitigate risk and to throw some kind of modified version of the event. But as you can imagine, that is an extraordinarily difficult event to have in any normal capacity during this time. So again, they're looking at some very creative ways to perhaps have some kind of celebration without having a large mass gatherings. So they are currently working on that and in touch with our office and informing us of any developments that they have moving forward.
Great. Thank you. Michelle with the next question.
Yes. There is an employer that is a private small business, and can they refuse service? Is it in violation of ADA to not allow customers into the business during a pandemic if the customer claims a disability?
So I believe the question there would be, if a customer claims a disability, they would be high risk, and therefore can an employer, is that the kind of the gist of the question?
Yes, sir, because they are not able to wear a mask.
Okay, I don't have a good answer for that one. That's another legal question. Unless anybody else on here has a good answer for that one, we maybe have to take back to our legal folks and figure out a good answer for that. Is that, or does someone know the answer to that?
This is Russell with the SBDC, and so we get thousands of legal questions every year. And what we recommend to all small businesses is you should have an attorney on your team as a small business owner, so that you're not making these type of assessments in a vacuum. And I'll say there's two answers to these type of questions. There's the legal aspect, but then there also is a reality aspect where you could be in the right but still get sued. So you need to understand, even though what you're doing may not be against the law, you could still be sued. So you need an attorney that you talk with to discuss risk, to discuss your policy, to discuss what you're doing. Just again, so use caution in that matter. We'd recommend that you would maybe get an attorney on your team that you'd ask those type of questions for your specific business to help you navigate those in your situation, rather than just assuming it's safe to do it because legally I'm good this way, so I'll do it. You could still have some challenges.
Okay. Thank you, Russell. We've got time for one more question. So I believe, Anthony, you're the next one on the list.
Yes, sir. With music events canceled, can a restaurant have a band play? If so, do they need to follow the rules for churches?
Daniel, have you guys taken that one yet? So thanks for that question. This is another tough one that this has not come up in the actual public health orders yet, but as things are opening up, it has been a discussion point among the restaurant industry and others that might be wanting to have some kind of entertainment on their property. I can speak from a guidance perspective from the public health officials, would say that as the caller mentioned about houses of worship that aren't doing choirs due to the risk from spreading through singing, would recommend no basically no wind instruments or singing of any kind where there's a person blowing in any kind of capacity, just because of the extremely high risk. When you're projecting in that fashion, COVID-19, if a person that's with COVID-19 could be spreading it much farther than just the standard 6 feet that we tend to say. So that would be my public health guidance question. As far as the legal one, that guidance has not come out yet.
Okay. Thank you very much, Daniel. And I want to say thank you and give my appreciation to Daniel from the governor's office, as well as Russell Wyrick from the Small Business Development Council for joining us on this today. Obviously, we're doing a million of these things, but we're going to try to do everything we can to keep it up, to make sure that you all have the information that you need to open up and operate safely for your customers and your workers. For those of you that were not able to get your questions answered, please don't worry about it. We have recorded them on our chat, and we will go back through and make sure we find good answers for your questions and be releasing an FAQ on this through our website and hopefully also through our YouTube and Facebook accounts as well. Thank you all very, very much for everything you do for the state of New Mexico. Thank you very much for working with your workers and your customers to make sure that we open up safely and can move forward effectively, and know that everyone in the Lujan Grisham administration is working as hard and as fast as we can to make sure that we're all doing this together. Thank you very much, everybody. Please enjoy the rest of your Monday as much as you can, and please stay safe out there.